thing is, we talk about shiny issues, but I don't think we should underestimate. And look at what's just happened in Europe, in France and Germany.
Yeah, but how do you deal with that without not glamorising, but that just shines more light on these issues, which shouldn't actually be offensive.
Well, I think the thing is they're there, right? The idea that you should shut things down and attack them. We've seen them with protesters around Just Stop Oil. We're seeing them around issues like this. The idea that you destroy things, you vandalise them, you don't have an open discussion and try and win people over to your point of view. It's the same thing, right? The common citizen. People are seen as evil if they've got different views. We need to create a situation in Britain where we have dialogue and discussion with those we disagree with. That's together an aspiration that we've got.
Well, exactly. You should be able to talk and agree to disagree. Which is why it's been quite nice. Various people have come out. There's one in one of the papers today. Jo Cox, remember Jo Cox, of course, the Labour MP who was murdered. Her sister has come out and saying how appalled she is at the attacks on Nigel Farage. Now, of course, I think politically they're sort of diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
Really. But the fact that she is coming out and saying this is not how we should be carrying ourselves in this country.
I know that we had, obviously, John Prescott bit and the egg and the punch and this sort of thing, but if I told you sort of 30 years ago we'd have two politicians murdered whilst they were in office, we have regularly attacks on politicians, either
and
politicians on their offices, death threats, all the time.
And
you'd be absolutely horrified.
As well, yeah.
And we sort of just... it feels like we've just sleepwalked into this and accept it.
And we're also seeing more attacks on citizens, and we're seeing people being hunted and their chance, and it's really unacceptable. Yeah. And I think the thing is that you have a sense, you have universal freedom. We all have a responsibility to uphold all of those freedoms here. You can abhor, it's Voltaire, you can abhor what someone else says, but we're fellow citizens, right? We need to be able to criticise the principles. You're not evil if we disagree. Have courage in your convictions, but also recognise this, because otherwise we get into a very dangerous situation where if might is over right, we're in big trouble.
But is that part of the social media thing, that people are living in echo chambers?
Yeah.
And therefore they just think, I'm right, you are wrong.
Yeah, because you then have all your biases confirmed back to you, and then you speak to other people. And then also, the other problem is the algorithm. So if you're concerned about one issue and you read about it, your algorithm then gives you more and more and more and more and more of that stuff. Yeah. So if you're, for instance, Googling how the atrocities in Palestine, your algorithm then gives you even more and more and more and more of those, even if it's the same story 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And then so you then become that this is... I'm not trying to diminish that tragedy in any way. But you then take one issue and then it becomes your whole life.
And all you get is people agreeing with you.
Well,
and your algorithm can then give you more and more stuff.
Mainstream media, if we're honest, which is it regurgitates and presents certain images and outlooks. So if you look, for instance, yesterday there was a protest and there was a question around Jeremy Corbyn and Hamas and that type of thing. But often in the press, certain ways of presenting things, we've seen it during lockdown, we've seen it in the contemporary period around the environment and on this discussion around Gaza and Israel, and this question of bias, whilst at the same time talking about misinformation and disinformation. It's a very popular term, right? Certain verifiers and that type of thing. But the idea that you have open debate, it's not just a social media thing. We have at the core that's come from the university, the idea you're not allowed to say that, you're going to offend me. And we've got to re-inject a sense of being robust with ourselves, free, open debate and discussion. Online safety bill across the board, we've seen attacks to undercut and take away our ability to free speak. If people think it's smart that someone they don't agree with gets shut down or cancelled, that's going to mean we're going to all end up being cancelled and silenced.